So you and I both make YouTube videos, and I don't want to feel too self-important by talking about the YouTube thing, but I think there are huge implications for the future of society based on these algorithmic changes. Would you agree with that?
I absolutely agree, and I don't think that's an understatement at all. We have seen seismic shifts in the history of culture and thought based on a new mechanism coming into play or a new use for that mechanism. So, no, I don't think it's self-important to talk about the medium because I think the medium is really affecting things.
Yeah, and when you said that, were you thinking about the printing press?
Well, yeah, that's one of many. Sure. And
okay.
I could go clear down the rabbit hole with you on how that changed things in more subtle ways than you usually talk about, but I think you get it.
Yeah, but YouTube is different. I think YouTube's very different because when YouTube itself came to the scene, you had, or social media in general, really, you had this way that you could communicate with people. It's like a new printing press. But the thing that's different about this than back in the day, Gutenberg and everybody, is that the distribution of all this information is throttled by someone. And that someone is the person that owns the company or the people that own the company that controls that social media platform.
Whereas in the past, it was throttled by the amount of paper you could get, how quickly you could disseminate that paper, how far the distribution reach could be, and a little bit what the owner of the printing press was willing to allow to put ink to paper on.
Right. And so the algorithm that you hear everybody talk about, or the way in which a piece of content that someone makes for the internet is distributed to people who have elected or not elected to see that content made by that particular content creator, that is becoming a more and more important thing in today's society. It's influencing the political landscape. It's influencing how people think. It's influencing how people, fix things. It's a big deal.
People who do what you and I do in private conversation speak about the algorithm in the same reverent, hushed tones that people used to talk about God.
They do. They actually
do.
People
pray to the algorithm. People theorize as to what the algorithm might want sacrifice, what thumbnail, what click-through rate does the algorithm need to be pleased? How does the algorithm show its favor to you? It's getting weird.
But what's interesting? Have you ever heard of that experiment? Derek mentioned it in his video, and this is something that a lot of us have been talking about.
You're talking about
the pigeon.
Derek from Veritasium.
Yeah, Derek from Veritasium. He made a really good video that unveils how he feels like the algorithm is working. And I think more than anyone, he is testing, ways to be effective using the algorithm, to his advantage. And one of the things he talked about in this video was the result of a conversation that he and I had, and he and I and other people have had in the past about this pigeon experiment. Have you ever heard about this pigeon experiment?
Help me out.
So basically you have these pigeons in a box, and you have this button in the box or something like that. And if the pigeon hits a button, and out pops a little bit of food, and the pigeon gets food, right? So they would then imprint on the button, right? And they're like, oh, okay, if I want food, I hit the button. Got it, understand it. But there was this other experiment that was performed where they had the button in the box, and they would randomly put food into the box with the pigeon. And depending on what that pigeon was doing at the time in the box randomly, like if he was walking across the button, or if he was turning around in a circle in the corner, or if he was bobbing his head a certain way, whatever the pigeon was doing, as this random input or stimulus via food came into the box, they tried to replicate the behavior they were doing in order to win the favor of this magic food god that would give them food.
Yes. Yeah, okay, I have heard about this, and wow.
That has implications, right?
Well, yeah, and the place where I've seen that play out, and I won't go far down this road, but it's in your swing in baseball. Baseball is such a superstitious game. Like, don't rub somebody else's jersey when they're on a hit streak. Don't talk to someone if they're throwing a no-hitter. Like, what exactly did I do when I stepped into the box? Nomar Garciaparra has to adjust his batting gloves the exact same way every time, and of course it's nonsense. But on that 1% chance that it's not nonsense, the human brain will say, repeat it. And if you didn't, it's easy to blame not repeating the silly thing for being a part of this. So it's not just pigeon brains. This is us too.
Well, it goes further than that. Like during World War II, the Army or whatever the armed forces component that flew airplanes at the time was, as they flew over islands in the Pacific, they'd build these big runways and they would land and all this stuff would come in. And, you had these different things on the airstrip. And I've read stories and heard some people, some Marines in Hawaii specifically, talk about in some of these places that they go, the indigenous people would build airstrips or things that looked like airstrips, like windsocks and things like that they saw at airstrips, because at some point in time, airplanes were landing and bringing precious cargo and new things that they hadn't seen before. And so they thought, well, obviously, the airstrip had to be here in order for the airplane to land, so let's just build an airstrip, and more of these magic aircraft will show up with goods that we want.
If this, then that.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, all this to say, I feel like at times, as a content creator on the internet, I can be a bit like the pigeon. And I can start to try to figure out, what's going on in order to please the algorithm. And we had a debate the other day, and you were included in that discussion. And I just want to I want to turn over cards here and just let everybody know it wasn't a crisis moment, but it was an important moment. I created this video with Trent about grain bins. And over the course of a year, we went out to this farm in this remote city in Alabama, and we would record the process of building a grain bin, and then the farmer harvesting the soybeans in this case, filling the grain bin, and then selling them at a certain elevated price based on the basis price at the time.
Which should have been relentlessly boring, but instead is one of the most fascinating videos you've ever done. I mean, if that thing were airing on PBS, you'd win an Emmy for it. It's excellent.
Thanks, dude. Appreciate that. We worked really, really hard on it. There were several of us. There was an editor that worked with us that digested all these mounds and mounds of footage that we went through. Trent and I spent a lot of time going back and forth. Long story short, we worked really, really hard on it. And so we finally got to the point where we're going to upload the video to the internet, and we had two questions that we have to ask. What do we name this video, and what thumbnail do we create? Mm-hmm. And the reason this is so important is because we've spent a year working on this, not like 100% of the time a year, but you get the idea.
Sure.
A lot of brain space and effort went into this.
Clearly.
But you have to boil all that down into one thumbnail and one title. And so we're talking about it, and we said, oh, you know what YouTube likes. What if we were to lay down in grain and just have our face exposed? It would be really interesting because it would be a human face in this grain, and you wouldn't know what's going on, and it would look like, we could call it something like, how do you store 7 billion beans, which is how many soybeans this thing can hold? Yeah, we could.
But I didn't like that thumbnail.
Yeah, you didn't like that thumbnail. When I first asked the farmer if I could take a picture like that, he was like, that's a bad idea. I was like, why? He goes, well, people die in grain bins all the time by getting suffocated by the grain. That's just not a good idea. And I'm thinking to myself, well, you're right, farmer. But at the same time, we want people to understand how important your job is. And so we had this crisis moment right before upload where we were kind of shuddering a little bit. I'll just call it a moment of weakness. We were like, maybe we should bow to the magic algorithm and we should do this clickbait thumbnail. And immediately, as the video is processing, Derek from Veritasium uploads his new video, Can You Swim in Shade Balls? Which is a very interesting video.
Yeah.
It asks a lot of questions, and it's a follow-on to his other video, why are there shade balls on this reservoir? And what do you think the thumbnail was? Did you see the original thumbnail he had up?
It was him laying in a gigantic floating pile of shade balls with just his face exposed.
Right.
Yep.
And so we were having this discussion, and then immediately his thumbnail pops up, and we instantly we're like, oh my gosh, it already has 600,000 views in like an hour. This is going to the moon, right? The algorithm has chosen that this is the video. It's just going to go crazy. And we're like, we can replicate that thumbnail, and we know how to. And so we had talked ourselves out of it, and you were in the room, and we said, well, I mean, we could do it. And you heard all the discussions. How do you want to describe it? I'm trying to...
You put all this work into this video. You want people to see it. You want people to appreciate what farmers do. And yet you are enormously conscious in your videos and everything you do on the internet about how you present things and not wanting to put stuff out there that someone could watch in part and get a bad idea and go do something and hurt themselves or someone else. So the way I would read it is you were in a catch-22. Having lived in Nebraska for a long time, my role in the room was to play games on my phone and pound the table for, don't do it, dude. You're trying to make a video that's a love letter to farmers about how awesome they are. And if the thumbnail is a picture of something that'll make them all cringe, it kind of defeats the purpose.
Right. But I can only imagine it was interesting for you to watch all that because you were kind of external. You hadn't put the time into the video.
Right.
You knew the fact that farmers die in grain bins all the time, but you also saw the struggle. And what's interesting is you actually understood it because you also create content for the internet. And
also spend the vast majority of time trying to figure out thumbnails and titles. Like the video's the easy part anymore. How do I got these two microscopic little things. It's a dumb little picture and a few words worth of title, and that's my chance to get somebody to watch it. The algorithm will offer it up. If right off the bat people aren't into it, then this really important thing that I think is really important, and in my case, could bridge the gap between people who don't like each other and be a step toward peace and better understanding and redemptive stuff. And so what do? Do I go clickbaity and do things that are kind of ridiculous and over the top with the title and the thumbnail, maybe even a tiny bit deceptive to get people in the door? It would be very easy to justify that in my brain in order to say, well, if I don't get them in the door, they won't encounter this redemptive message that'll be good for people who believe all kinds of different things. But at the same time, I don't really want to make a disingenuous title or thumbnail. And so, I don't know, do you want to be effective or not? How far are you willing to go in order to be effective? Yeah, I wrestle with it all the time.
So you saw it play out. And you saw the very intense conversation that happened, and you saw that we ultimately decided to go with just me in a grain bin throwing grain in the air.
Which I liked. I thought it was a nice picture. Not as effective for clicks, but a nice picture.
Yeah. So we did it. And turns out these are the thoughts we're having. The video performed well. It's got over 2 million views, which is good for me.
That's good.
Immediately after that happened, I called Derek and said, Derek, we're struggling with all this stuff, and I don't like the brain space that I'm in. I feel like these same competitive pressures are why peacocks have bright feathers. I mean, I feel like this is why some people feel like they need to surgically augment their bodies. I mean, this is a weird brain space that I don't do in any other aspect of my life, but I'm doing it now. And Derek, you're playing the game really well, and we all know that. Would you mind coming on No Dumb Questions and talking to Matt and I about it? And thankfully, he said yes. I think the cool thing about it is that all this happened while you were in the room, and so you and I were physically co-located for this episode.
Yeah, which is always a bit of a trip when we get started, but what can you do?
Yeah, and to be clear, we are recording this episode that you're about to listen to with new equipment that we hadn't quite figured out. Rode gave us a new recording device called a Rodecaster, and this is us working through the quirks of trying to figure it out. We actually love it, but at this point in time...
Yeah, we like their products in general. I mean, that's what we use for our fuzzy mics on top of cameras, and it's what we record the podcast on all the time with their USB mics.
Yeah, so this is us trying to figure it out, so any bad things that happen are us not knowing how to use it yet. It's not a reflection on the equipment, because I think we've got that dialed now. But anyway, let's go talk to Derek from Veritasium, and a big thanks to Derek for jumping on the channel with us.
Yeah, interesting subject. Let's get after it.
Okay, this is a very special episode of No Dumb Questions. We're physically in the same place.
I don't know what to do with my face.
Yeah, so what do I look at you? What do I do?
I kind of want to go across here at this angle, and I know that's not right. We are not professionals.
We don't know what we're doing. Okay, so for the first time ever, we're actually going to record this video and put it up on YouTube. And so the YouTube channel, youtube.com/NoDumbQs, I think it is.
Yeah, high risk, low reward.
There you go.
That's a good idea.
But more importantly, we have who I'm going to call the king of YouTube, at least right now.
Today?
That just gets, today. Derek Muller from the YouTube channel Veritasium, or as, how do we say it?
Are we actually going to do this? Are we actually going to talk about what? I think it's Veritasium. I think I've already.
Yeah.
I think I've always identified that properly, and there's nothing to discuss.
How's it going, Derek?
It is going very well. Thank you for having me.
I'm sorry I called you Dirk from Vegetabilium in the first episode of this podcast.
Yeah, that's all right.
It was a disorienting time in my life, and some things happened. I'm not proud of it.
Yeah, so Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I'm over it. I'm good.
So, Derek, what's been going on? Full disclosure, we have no idea how to do a podcast when we're in the same room together. So we're really trying to do this, and it's not working out well so far.
I'm
It's
excited.
along great with thousands of miles distance between us.
Yeah. No, I'm excited to witness this. This is a historic moment, and I'm delighted to be, your remote guest for this special episode.
So there's a couple things I'd like to talk to you about. We've been wanting to talk to you for quite a while. Number one, you have been doing a lot of research on YouTube lately, and number two, I just want to throw the ball around about being dads at some point, because I've witnessed an amazing transformation in your life over the last couple of years, and I've really enjoyed it. So what do you want to hit first, man?
I'll take anything you got. Yeah. No,
You said doing a lot of research on YouTube. Now, what's the direct object there? Because I think everybody presents their research on YouTube, but Derek's been actually doing research on the subject of YouTube,
Right.
which was enormously helpful. How's that video done? The one with the flippy cards.
Yeah, the flip chart video about how to go viral or why my video went viral. It did pretty well. It did surprisingly well because I didn't know that would be of interest to many people.
Behind you?
Yes. Behind me, there was a flip chart that I actually hired someone to make because I am in no way an artist. So if I tried to make that, it would be totally illegible. So I worked with an artist animator for 4 days to actually make the whole flip chart. So that was an experience. But yeah, I think the video has been well received, and I've definitely got a lot more people getting in contact with me over this video. You can have a video that does 10 million or 30 million views, but people don't necessarily reach out to connect. So many people have been reaching out to say, how much this meant to them and that it resonated with them. And, particularly a lot of YouTubers are saying that. So, I guess that's nice to hear that we're all sort of going through the same thing. That was really what I was trying to do there, was put my experience down in some way that made sense.
Well, I guess to frame it, the whole idea here is you made a video to try to explain the YouTube algorithm and how it works and how we as consumers of the algorithm interact with it and we as creators of content interact with it. Is that how you interpreted the video?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not in charge of the video, though. Is that how you interpreted the video?
For sure.
Who made it?
I mean, I think we live kind of within the medium of YouTube, which makes the idea of how does YouTube work and how did those workings affect the platform, I think that makes them central everyday parts of your life. There was this phrase, the medium is the message, which goes back to a Canadian professor in the 1970s. And I feel like I always kind of studied that and never understood it. Really, what does that mean? What is he talking about? But now that I'm a YouTuber and I've spent 9 years making YouTube videos, I feel like I've got a whole different appreciation for what does that mean? The medium is the message. And I guess the bottom line for me is that the way it seems is that the fundamental machinations of YouTube, like the algorithm, determine what content is on the platform and what audiences watch it. And what is the character of YouTube? What is the soul of YouTube? That's actually not determined, I would argue, by the audiences or the creators. It's determined by the platform itself, which I think is a really crazy idea and something not a lot of other people acknowledge, which is why I wanted to make that video and sort of highlight these things that have kind of been driving me crazy. And see if anyone else agrees, I guess, with how I see it.
Marshall McLuhan, that's the guy, right?
Marshall McLuhan, yeah.
Yeah. So when I first came across that quote, and I can't remember the name of the blue book that quote is in, but it's a beast to read through.
Media, the Extensions of Man, I think.
Fine work.
Yeah.
Once you see that, you start seeing everything through those lenses. And so you start thinking, okay, television requires X number of ad breaks. Clearly, they figured out where the two curves align for maximum amount of ads that can be present for maximum revenue. If you're talking you're watching Alf in 1985, you're going to see 22 minutes of Alf, and you're going to see 8 minutes of advertisements spread over, 4 breaks, and then one on each end. And so then you go back and you watch reruns of, I don't know if you can actually even... I don't know if Alf is actually out there, but I should have picked something more accessible. But you go back and watch that, and you understand that the storytelling is stunted and abbreviated, and even the jokes are crafted around that economic reality of just how money worked on TV in the 1980s. And I guess I just hadn't thought about that to that McLuhan level that you brought me to in the video about YouTube. But what's weird is, as you pointed out in the video, they keep changing it. And, maybe we get why that happens, so we can talk about that more. But you get us all to a place where we're thinking about, we're crafting our media or our message around the constraints of a certain type of media. You change those ground rules, we find out about that. It's almost like it rewires our brains every time the algorithm changes. Is that an overstatement?
I don't know that it rewires our brains, but it definitely shifts, I think, how we make content. And maybe that is, in the long term leads to a rewiring, I think one of the things that drove me nuts was this idea that videos that get a lot of views are better videos. Because that's the public perception, right? When I had this video that did 30 million views, I had people emailing me to be like, whoa, Derek, great video. You really nailed it. And it's not that I didn't think my video was good, because I think it was. I think it was a good video. But I don't think, the views were proportionate to the quality. And I think I've had other really good videos that don't blow up. And I guess, it's easy when you have, a bad video to say, well, the algorithm sucks. It should have done, this video should have done better. But I think when you have a video that blows up, that's the time to say, this algorithm's a bit weird. It's working wrong.
We actually had a conversation about you today, Derek. So Trent and another guy, we work on videos together, and we were making this video about grain bins. And right before we clicked upload, we're sitting there struggling about what thumbnail to put on the video. And we're also thinking about what title and all these things. And right before we clicked upload, your thumbnail pops up. Your latest video, Can You Swim in Shade Balls? Is that the name of the is that the name of the video?
That is the title of the video, yes, sir.
Okay, so here's the deal. We watched that video. And you have to understand, to make this grain bin video, over the course of literally a year, we went out to my buddy's farm about an hour away. We worked on a crew for a week to build this grain bin, went out there, filmed the harvest, loading the grain bin, unloading grain bins, a lot of work. And when we watched your video, which was excellent, let's admit it was excellent, it was interesting because I could tell you were doing things because I know you're a freaking genius. For example, did the video need to be 10 minutes and 34 seconds long or whatever it was?
That's a good question. I was sort of torn about how long to make it, but I don't know. Did it need to be that long? You tell me. I mean, my last two videos before this have been 12 minutes. And frankly, if I could have made this one 12, I would have done it. I had some other footage, but I was just it doesn't... Frankly, so I feel like I was pretty judicious with 1040 was basically where it came out. And I was like, you know what? That's okay.
Can you explain to me the thought process? Because you did something I did not do for the video I made. I didn't think about how long the video should be. I was just like, this is how much content I have. And I threw it out there.
What does yours come in at?
17. But I had an ad in mind and you didn't, right? And
yours was abrupt.
Yeah, it was
just over, and then it was a Patreon's a thing. Bye.
Oh yeah, by the way, so genius. By the way, you're gonna sign these shade balls, and you're gonna send. But support Veritasium on Patreon, everyone. I mean, that is a killer smart move, man. I mean, people support No Dumb Questions on Patreon. It's huge to not have to be tied to that revenue like that. So congratulations on doing that.
Thank you. I gotta say, I guess this is sort of. There's a strategic approach that I'm taking right now towards trying to insulate Veritasium from shocks of whatever sort, like changes in the algorithm or, changes in my life or whatever. So I'm trying to make it so that if I want to keep making videos, I can keep making videos and that they'll financially make sense. And if there's no sponsors or whatever, everything continues to make sense. So that's what a lot of these steps sort of play into. And I wonder if this idea came to my head because of a conversation I had with you when, I was talking about doing this viral video with you before I did it, and you were like, well, you got to talk about Patreon, man. Like, push that, because that could be a serious buffer, for you if times get tough with the AdSense or the whatever, and allow you to keep making videos. And I was like, I feel like it's too much messaging for this one video. But then after my shade balls video blew up and people were asking, like, can you swim in them? I was like, oh man, that's ridiculous. But then I thought about it harder, and I was like, I'm in a position now where I could actually buy shade balls, and they cost like $3,000, but I can do that. It's not crazy. It's not financially ruinous for me. And then I was like, but what do I do with the shade balls once I'm done? And I was just kind of stuck on that one night. And the thought just popped into my head, just mail them to your Patreon supporters. Sign them and mail them out. And I was like, I know that'll be crazy, but if it drives a few more people to Patreon, like, totally worth it. And hopefully those people stick around for the long run. And so this is like, yeah, it's a big effort that I got to make right now, but, sort of an investment, in the long term. And it's also one of those things where I'm kind of paying it forward, because you could pledge $1 today. I'll still send you a shade ball, but, hopefully you stick around for long enough to pay for the shipping. So that's sort of the hope.
So Derek's a genius.
Yes, he is.
The way he handed out the shade balls at the end of that video to his patrons, genius.
Yep.
And
just all of them.
You and I both know that the balance of how we get funding here on No Dumb Questions, the lion's share comes from the sponsors. And so are we just going to blatantly steal his idea? I think we do it.
Why on earth would we not blatantly steal a brilliant idea? But here's the thing. He sent out shade balls. You know what those are good for? Shading reservoirs. And do you know how many it takes? More than one. So here's what we could do that I think might have a little stronger application. We had talked about this enamel pin idea a while back. I think we just pulled the trigger and we design and print up a crap ton of those winged hussar enamel pins, like the kind that you can poke through something, like put on your backpack or something.
Yes.
And we just send them to literally everybody.
So if you're a patron of the podcast, you get one. That's how it works.
Well, that was easy.
Yeah, that was
That's
easy.
the deal. Be a patron, get the thing. If you're a patron at the time that we mail them out, and I guess you have to have your address entered into Patreon so that we know where to send it. But if that's the case, you get one.
Yeah, this makes total sense. And the way it works is we call everyone that listens to the podcast the third chair. And the patrons, they're the people that have arrived in our time of need. And that is
Arrived.
The winged hussars. So
Yeah.
if you would like to arrive as a winged hussar, now is your chance. There's a link below. You can go, because it's a desperate race against the mind.
And a race against time.
Desperation!
Can I just pick a random, like, one person and send them a dollop of warm mayonnaise instead? Just like an envelope, like a standard mailing envelope, but like one spoonful of warm mayonnaise, and then just lick it and seal it and send it? Just one person.
No, and I think you might have detracted from everything we just tried to do. So
Fine, no mayonnaise, only pins.
ignore what Matt just said. Everyone who signs up
One of you people are
will
getting
get
mayonnaise and you're
an
gonna hate
enamel
it.
winged hussar pin. Have you thought about how we're going to mail these out? Have you thought about
No, we'll figure all of that out later. That's how responsibility works.
There is a logistics nightmare that's going to happen after.
Yes, there is. It's
Okay.
going to be horrible. We'll figure it out.
It's going to be awesome. Everybody's going to be officially, if you want to officially be a winged hussar, this is how to do it. So go to Patreon. If you have signed up, be sure to get an address in there that we can get in the system, because we're going to have to like do some kind of mail merge thing to put addresses on envelopes or something.
Oh, dude. Then you'll be able to identify other people by the pin they have on their backpack.
Oh,
You will make random friends. And I'm not kidding, man. That happens.
really?
Yeah, that kind of stuff happens. I mean, 2 times last week I had somebody who made the connection. Yeah, I'm telling you, it just comes up from time to time. There are other hussars out there. You will figure out who they are now. It's an identifying mark.
Let's do it. Thank you so much, all patrons, for supporting. In all seriousness, this is an attempt to just straight through the front door balance out how we financially pull the podcast off. We're trying to I don't know, get eggs in multiple baskets so that we, at any point in time, are not subject to something not being put on the schedule, like a sponsorship not hitting a certain month or something like that. This is an attempt to diversify.
Yeah, well, it just keeps the energy and momentum rolling to hit a certain publication schedule and keep getting stuff done, because I think this is a lot of fun and I like doing it.
And the winged hussars arrived.
And
Yeah,
I
so-
also think we should send a few people the pin and also like an empty mayonnaise pack in a separate envelope. Like we should just do that. You got the mayonnaise.
I don't think it's gonna work, man. I mean, the hussars are gonna arrive, but the mayonnaise thing, man, really?
I just want people to open that envelope and be like, look, I got my pin. It's mayonnaise. It's just warm mayonnaise.
Can I just say that for the last year, consistently, your content has been my favorite content on the internet. It started with the salt lamp video.
He says that when you're not around.
Well, thank
Yeah.
you for saying, because like this is the utmost praise. You know, you know, it is. I'm such a fan of everything that you do, Destin. That when it's not just it's one thing for a random stranger to say I love what you do. It's another thing for you to say I love what you've been making, because it means a lot to me.
Well, we're bros. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, we so the thing I like about this relationship with Matt is, it's rare for somebody to get in the inner circle and be able to like look you in the eyes and tell you that you suck at something or that you messed something up.
Try to say it nicer than that.
But so like Matt will give me very honest negative feedback, and it's hugely important to me, and you do the same with me. And I think having people that will give you that negative feedback that's a big deal. I think so. And so thank you for giving me all the negative feedback over the years. But I want to tell you something about
You make it sound like all I do is tell you your stuff's bad, which I don't feel like I've done that.
No, you don't. No, you don't. But you're willing to do it. Like you're honest, and you're a man of integrity.
It's his barometer of friendship. It's like some kind of masochistic thing. And it doesn't make sense for most people, but
I want to tell you. So you guys are more similar than you know. You're very, very different people, by the way. Like I'm kind of like in the middle of this friendship. I'm friends with you and friends with you. But so you both think very differently about a lot of things in the world. But one thing that you're very similar on is this video you did recently, Derek, about film or video, I guess you could say. And Derek, Derek has a PhD in teaching people with medium.
did not know that.
Media.
Congrats. That's a lot of work.
And you did a master's degree on public broadcast. What was it? It was
My second master's thesis was on the beginning of television in rural Nebraska,
Whoa,
1953, 54.
that is a topic. That is cool.
Everybody was still alive. Almost everybody was still alive. So I got all these old folks from nursing homes and stuff talking about the hijinks of being on air for the first time. And yeah, it's fascinating original research, but I wasn't aware of the overlap. But
that they're still alive. That's awesome.
yeah, it was fun to bounce it back and share it, and it was also fun to hear all the things they asked me not to put in the document.
like what? Obviously, like what?
It was-
You're not writing a
It's been
document
10
now.
years. I think that's fair game.
They're probably dead.
I think you automatically go to prison for a lot of the things that they said
Oh, are
in
you serious?
2019. But back then, apparently it was okay. One of the things that they would do is there were three of the guys who were real loosey-goosey and one of the guys who was real uptight and trying to imitate New York news media. And so these three guys would, they'd get all set up behind the desk from time to time, and then Fancy Man would come in, and he'd look over behind the desk on air and realize that the other guys were wearing literally nothing below the jacket. Just...
They were just naked.
Yeah, and this old guy describing whatever term they used to describe that state of being.
To
was
be
entertaining.
clear, Derek, I'm wearing pants.
To be clear, I am not.
Oh,
Since
well,
we're
thank you for
filming,
showing
we'll
me
just
that.
Remain seated.
Derek's like, what the crap? Derek's like, why did I agree to be on your podcast?
Yeah, and then the fancy guy was getting all uptight on air, and so one of the guys I interviewed went over and just cut his tie right here, and I think somebody got fired over it. It was a parting of ways kind of relationship thing, but it'd be like Mad Men, just telling the story of this this news channel in whatever Holdridge, Nebraska, in the 1950s and all that went on. It was pretty fun. Whatever the case, I was making some bigger, important, fancy-sounding, defensible thought that seemed academic, but mostly I just liked the stories about the male nudity behind the desk.
But Derek, your PhD was on using video as a way to educate.
Yeah. So it was really a way to like try to merge what I wanted to do, be making videos or films or whatever, and science, which I was good at, you know. So I had this PhD that was, how can we use films to teach physics? So I spent 3 years essentially making films and testing them on students and seeing what worked better.
What was your matrix for that? How did you know if it worked?
Well, we'd test them. We tested them before and after with these like standardized tests and try to look for gains. You know, did they improve their scores?
So what worked best?
So the thing that I found worked best was explicitly discussing misconceptions. You know, in the sciences and physics, misconceptions are a really prominent area of research because in your day-to-day experience of the world, you know, you experience things like friction, and that kind of masks a lot of the fundamental physics that's going on there and the way inertia works and things like that. So when you just ask about like intuitive things, a lot of people get it wrong because they have these ideas about, you know, you need a force to keep something moving, for example. Like that's kind of intuitive. But that's only because friction's there. If you take friction out of the equation, then of course an object in motion stays in motion. So, you know, it's fine, like we can learn to memorize those things, but it's very hard to change the fundamental conception of the universe to really take on a Newtonian view. So I tried out these videos where, you know, we'd explain it as clearly as we could, like we'd use textbook explanations, we would use animations, we'd use real world examples, we'd go through all this stuff, like basically the best lecture we could give with all these multimedia, and then we'd test kids afterwards, and we'd find that they were more confident in their answers. They would say, yeah, I think I learned something from that video, I really enjoyed it, and I'm more confident in my answers now. But if we looked at pre to post test, there was no movement. That they didn't actually gain any more correct answers on the post test than they did on the pre. Whereas a separate treatment we did where we pointed out, you know, it's a misconception to think that when you throw an object in the air, there's a force in that ball that keeps it going against gravity. And then eventually it dies away and gravity balances it at the top, and then gravity wins and the ball accelerates downwards. You know, we'd go through stuff like that and we would illustrate it without saying like this is wrong necessarily. But then gradually we'd come around to the right idea, and then we'd test the kids again. So we definitely had the possibility of really confusing these kids, because instead of just seeing the right answer, they were seeing the wrong answer and then the right answer. And sometimes, you know, it was in a dialogue format was one of the things I tried, where we didn't really say that like this guy's always wrong and this person's right, but they kind of figured it out because the dialogue was reasonably natural. And for novices, their scores almost doubled going to the post-test. Now, by no means do I think they're Newtonian reasoners now, but I do think that we've moved them somewhere down the path, which we definitely didn't do by giving them a really clear lecture-like presentation. So I'd say that was a big finding for my PhD.
Do I understand correctly that you're saying you have to deconstruct what someone understands first before you can then relay the foundation of truth? Is that what you're saying?
It's interesting to put it that way, because when I talk to a lot of teachers, they're saying to me, okay, Derek, so we need to blow up these misconceptions. And what I say to them is, actually, the misconceptions are so strongly ingrained that you probably never like get rid of them. The best you can hope to do is actually use them as a foothold. I kind of imagine it like, you know, scaling a wall or climbing a mountain or something. And it's like, this misconception is just a place that is a really great hold. It's a place that people will want to come back to over and over and over. They'll always go there. So instead of trying to get rid of that, just embrace it and sort of understand why it is. You know, you think that you have to maintain a constant force to keep something moving at a constant speed because there are frictional forces opposing you. So you got to learn that those forces are really equal, and that's why you got to keep applying that force. But if we were in space, then you could remove. But basically, so you want to build the context around it. So I almost think of it like as planting a flag in those things, as saying, you know what, you're going to come back to this, but remember, it's flagged to say, like, this is a misconception because of how friction makes the world appear. And if we were in a friction-free environment, you would see something quite different. So I always think about building around it, like build scaffolding around it that sort of, honors these ways of seeing the world, which, make a lot of sense. And like, there's reasons why we think that way. But to go to a sort of a more foundational perspective, we need to build out these structures from there and sort of, understand why that is and go from there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm tracking. And I think it's ludicrously insightful and surprisingly well aligned with what I do. I find what you guys do fascinating. I like to swim in those waters. What you guys do was my favorite subject as a high school kid. But I went to college to play baseball and major in baseball, and they didn't really do science. So I did history and philosophy. But the structures, and I keep trying to convince Destin of this, the structures are not that different. Now you're talking about someone becoming gifted in Newtonian reasoning. Well, I mean, what is Newtonian reasoning? It's just the natural sciences of the classical world and the early modern age put into a more structured, more repeatable format so that you're putting some actual flesh and substance to observations and assumptions that you're making from abstract reason about what you see. And so what's interesting about what you're saying to me, though, is that we kind of fall in love with those misconceptions. They provide a sense of order. They make us feel good. They make us feel like we understand the world around us and what happens when we do things. That's your phone.
That's the phone we're talking on right now.
I was going to drop it,
Yeah.
but it's your phone.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just leave my phone down there, but you get the point as to what happens when I drop my phone. But what's interesting is to hear you coming from a hard sciences perspective, telling me that misconceptions is hurdle number one to learning, because that's absolutely been my experience in dealing overwhelmingly in the realm of the abstract with theology, philosophy, history. And I don't know, do people get defensive when you push back on deeply ingrained misconceptions about the physical world?
I think less so. I think, when people have misconceptions about other things that they're like deeply invested in or, then yeah, they'll push back. But when it's about the physical world, I feel like there's less vested interest or something. There's less of self invested in these things. And I think generally people are amazed and kind of excited when they learn the sort of truth about the physical world. I've seen that so many times when I go out and, in my early videos, a lot of what I did was talking to people on the street and just taking these things to them and showing them discrepant events and then showing a way to resolve them. So that was kind of like one of the things that I love doing. A lot of people want me to keep doing it, but there's only so many of those things, that I could do. So I've kind of like run out of a lot. But I think people do really enjoy it. Yeah.
So you feel like it prompts more toward wonder than irritation. So in other words, you're endearing yourself to people when you push back on those misconceptions.
I hope so. And it also depends on how you do it, right? Like the place that I come from is not this place of like, I know everything and you're an idiot. The place I come from is like, most of the world doesn't know this, but isn't it fascinating? And I love it so much that I hope that some of that love is communicated to them when I, explain it or show it or do a demonstration with them. I used to teach for about 7 years at a tutoring company in Sydney. And some of my favorite moments, I would get chills down my spine when I was teaching. If I taught...
Really?
Yeah, if I would get literal chills down my spine. One of the greatest moments when I could do this was when I showed that de Broglie's wave assumption about electrons yielded mathematically through the equations Bohr's assumption that angular momentum of these orbits was quantized. So Bohr's came from this totally...
I'm going to level with you, Derek. I have no idea what you just said.
I knew several.
I almost feel like pulling out the equations right here.
What were those words again? I really want to know what they are.
When I was teaching this, it used to give me chills to teach about Bohr basically coming in and saying the reason an atom doesn't just collapse into itself, the electrons don't just spiral into the nucleus, is because maybe for some random reason their angular momentum is quantized. And quantized just means comes in multiples of a smallest chunk. Destin, you give me a funny face, so I'm going to say like money is quantized. It comes in multiples of pennies. Okay? Every amount of money is a multiple of pennies. So Bohr was just saying every amount of angular momentum is a multiple of the smallest amount of angular momentum, a quantum of angular momentum. But he was coming to that from this just like, maybe this is the way it is. He was like ad hoc proposition. And then de Broglie came along years later and said, maybe the electron is both particle and wave, and its wavelength is given by this relation. And what's amazing is that if you look at the two equations, you can rearrange one. I'm getting the chills. You can rearrange the de Broglie equation to look exactly like the Bohr equation. So a result of having a wave-like electron and wrapping it around to form orbits gives you the exact same equation as angular momentum is quantized. So it fundamentally gives you this physical interpretation for why angular momentum is quantized. It's because the electron fundamentally is a wave phenomenon.
So they were both right.
Yes.
They were seeing the same truth from a different perspective.
Absolutely. I mean, de Broglie's was almost, you could argue, more complete because he had a physical picture of what was going on, and he had this intuition into the nature of matter that no one had ever had. And once he had that, it all clicked, you know? It all fit.
But again, we're back to that evolution from the natural sciences, which used to be, we called it philosophy, into the natural sciences as we think of it now, where you actually have hard data in front of you and something to look at and work at and shoulders to stand upon. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's fun because this Bohr fellow, when was he doing business?
1913 was his model of the atom.
Okay. Yeah, I feel affinity with the kind of the abstract natural science minded people, because when we do this whole thing and you want to talk physics with me, it's really fun for me to try to guess how it works, but I don't have anything to draw on other than I've seen things happen and I'm trying to get it somewhere in the zip code of truth and reality. And then you fill in the gaps with actual truth and reality because this is what you do, and it clicks and it makes sense. But it would have taken me decades of study to be conversant in the physical realities we're dealing with. But even an idiot like me can look at those basic phenomena and kind of wrap my brain around it. That's exactly what I was going to say. It was perfect.
Yeah. So I don't know. I didn't know this about you. I didn't know that teaching gave you chills. I didn't know. I kind of thought that it was a secondary thing to your passion that was making video.
It's really tough. I
didn't understand what he said earlier. Like all those words he said, like I don't know physics like he does.
I want to draw you some pictures, man. I don't know engineering like you do, you know? We all have like places that we spent a lot of time, you know? I spent how many hours, how many times did I teach that lesson? You know, 50 times maybe. It wouldn't have been crazy to teach that lesson 50 times. I would frequently, because we had these really intense holiday periods where I would teach the same class 3 times a day, and it ran for 3 hours. So I was teaching for 9 hours a day. And I guess what excited me about doing that was like, the same thing, 3 hours, 3 hours, 3 hours. And every class, you know, would be another chance for me to like hone that joke or like get the from the class when they got that, you know, like it's like a performance, you know? So I loved acting, you know, I did drama projects, and, you know, teaching was like an extension of that for me. It's about communicating and, you know, presenting and inspiring and like all those things. I want to form excitement in my audience. And in a way, YouTube is like an extension on that.
So here's a question. So I've noticed, let me frame it this way. You now just talk to me about how much you love to teach using YouTube and all this good stuff. But fundamentally, it's the teaching and the knowledge going from your brain to someone else's brain that really makes the chills happen for you. But I've noticed that you're starting to weaponize YouTube to great effect, right?
Yeah.
After you and I were in New York, and we were hanging out with Mr. Beast at the Creator Summit, the
Gold Jacket Club.
Monocle Club.
Gold Jacket Monocle Blimping Club.
That's right. When we were there, you and I had a conversation with Jimmy, and we started talking about this stuff, and we arrived at the CTR, the click-through ratio. If it gets above a certain percentage and you can get a view time of at least, 7 minutes, then you get a banger, right? Mm-hmm. And so then it's going to go to more people. So the question is, how much do you change your content in order to get it to more people? I mean, this is something I can really see you struggling with right now,
Sure.
and you're doing it very well.
I appreciate you saying that. I think that is the fundamental question, is how much do you change to fit what's going to work for the system? You change too much, and then what's the point in doing it in the first place? Because that's not what you signed up for. Mm-hmm. But you don't change it at all, you stay small. I think the biggest reason people don't watch, certain channels is not because that channel's videos are not good or they wouldn't be interested in them, but because they just don't know about them. So I would argue that the number one problem we have is just exposure to audience. And that's where I think that you need to have some viral videos to crack that, to expose yourself to a few more people who then will come along for the journey. And that's what you need. Because what I do see is that channels that focus just on this is what I want to do and I'm just going to keep doing exactly this again and again and again, they shrink over time. And that's not a position that I want to put myself in. At the same time, I don't want to totally abandon my mission. So for me, there's a great talk by Jack Conte called Adjust Your Packaging, which is essentially about deciding what is inside your box that you really care about, and like these are the things that are essential to you, and what is outside your box and is sort of the wrapping on it and the things that like I don't care about, frankly. Like, we could change a lot of stuff and I still don't mind. One of those things for me is actually the particular pieces of science that I take on. So if taking on the science of shade balls is way more attractive to people than the science of, say, salt lamps, then I'm okay with doing the shade balls. I find so much in this universe fascinating that I feel like if it's about what content that I choose to do, like I'm happy to make some different choices if I feel like that could yield a 10x return in terms of, who sees it or, what new audience I could discover what I'm doing. What I think is core, what I think is inside the box is that fundamentally this is good science. It is the truth as best as I can, discern it. And I'm communicating it in a way that I feel like is honest and good and can help people understand it. So I feel like those sorts of things, like the way I do it, are inside the box. But sort of like what topic I'm doing, what the thumbnail looks like, I'm willing to negotiate on those things because like I'm not wedded to a thumbnail.
You should be.
I don't know. Mm-hmm. So that's where I'm hoping to go. At the same time, I think everyone has to realize that YouTube does change you a bit. And the way YouTube works does change the content. Like it does. Maybe it makes it better. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
So for the sake of our audience, for the sake of the third chair, this is Jack Conte, the founder of Patreon.
Correct.
And more importantly, the electric keyboardist for Pomplamoose, correct?
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
Yes, that
and for the sake of Derek here, I just want to let you know a little bit about Matt. So Matt has a YouTube channel. It's called the 10-Minute Bible Hour.
I've seen it.
Like teaching people about the Bible.
You're a good sport.
Yeah.
I've seen some. Look, I'm going to demonstrate how I've seen it. I've seen you talking near a volcano.
Yeah, that happened once.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I believe it was inclement weather. Was it inclement the day you were there? Was it cloudy? Was it rainy?
It absolutely was.
That? And this I watched like I think well over a year ago because I was whenever you guys started the podcast, I started looking into who is this Matt character. Got to make sure my buddy Destin's hanging out with good folk.
With the
somebody reputable.
You brainwashed.
You passed muster.
Looking out for him.
Yeah.
So one thing about Matt's channel is it's a very well produced channel. But one thing I noticed early on when we first became friends was he kind of made his bed and he was gonna lie in it. He's like, I'm gonna make content like this, and it was clear to me like, okay, this content will not, by definition, get massive engagement.
You ain't joking.
It's just not gonna happen. Mm-hmm. Like doing Christianity on the internet is like suicide for trying to get engagement.
It might just be suicide.
Don't sugarcoat
period. Yeah. Well, first of all, it's not a fun topic to talk about on the internet. it can be a very difficult topic to talk about with actual humans in person, because unlike what you talk about, people do have very strong presuppositions, or I should say strong passions about their presuppositions regarding history, philosophy, theology, ideas, all of this stuff, because we build our worlds around our assumptions negatively or positively this way. And that can get, I mean, I'm in a position where I'm more likely to be viewed as the threat than the person who comes along and like, hey, let's have a fun talk about the thing. Whoa, I didn't know that thing about the Crusades. Now I do, and my life has been enriched. No, you get hit with rocks when you do what I do. Rocks if you're lucky. And so Destin's right, though. Early on, all I wanted to do was take the raw material of just big chunks of Bible. I thought, well, I'll just go one little piece at a time and show people, like, hey, there's some pretty weird ways to read this book that can lead you to pretty destructive conclusions. And then there's some pretty more reliable ways that are more like how you would interpret any book or any movie. And if you apply common sense interpretive skills to this the way you do intuitively with the rest of life, you arrive at defensible conclusions that tend to be pretty good for everybody inside and outside the boundaries of faith.
But
and
you can't get someone to just jump on board.
You can't, but I didn't understand that about YouTube. So I was like, I'll just put this beautiful thing right there on the interwebs. I'll crack a couple jokes and everybody will be like, oh, we should have world peace now and quit cannibalizing each other on the internet, and people of belief and not belief can come together and we can get along and set our no. Well, first of all, you got to get people to watch, and that was a trick. But gradually what I've figured out is that the thing that people don't really want out of the 10-minute Bible hour is the Bible. The number of minutes are super negotiable, but just don't bore me with the stupid Bible stuff. And the thing that's difficult about that is I think the Bible is ridiculously interesting for religious reasons, but also because of the long shadow it casts over the history of the West and the non-West. If you want to explain the last couple thousand years of history, understanding that book is really, really helpful. And indeed, I think it could even be argued that almost all of thought since that book came into existence is in dialogue with that book, for better, for worse, like it, don't like it. And I think a lot of the chafing that we experience right now between people who see the world differently is that unspoken dialogue over that book. So I had all these noble...
Because there's assumptions that take place. Yeah. But what I find interesting about what you're doing now is you're changing, because you're using the Derek approach, because Derek says, okay, there's, like, for example, if you and I want to go eat spaghetti, Derek, there's going to be some things we have to agree on. We need noodles and we need sauce. Whether it's thin noodles or thick noodles doesn't really matter. Whether there's meat in the sauce or not doesn't really matter. So what you're doing more recently is you're starting to change your format and your content, and you're going to like actual humans that disagree, because that was the intent to begin with. You wanted to make content for people that hated Christians and be like, hey,
or Christians who hate other Christians.
Right. Yeah. You wanted to make that content, but now you're starting to figure out, I think this is what you're doing, to actually go to those people and say, hey, what's up? What do you think? So Matt's doing this thing where he goes to these different churches and he asks them what they think, and then he's really quiet. It's interesting.
Real quiet, which makes people uncomfortable.
You know, that
gets me yelled at, maybe slightly less.
That used to be one of my tricks when I would interview people on the street, was mainly just staying quiet. That's my main interview skill, is like not jumping in when a more novice interviewer would just intercede or would feel like the moment was awkward. That's the key. It's just
I'm guilty of that. I talk too much.
Oh no, I thought you were going to say that you did the same thing, because I feel like you go out and
I'm not smart enough to do that.
I feel like you get a lot of stuff out of people, but I think that's the key, is like the camera's rolling, ask the question, and just leave a big pause. And who knows, like they'll feel like they need to fill that pause, and you'll get something authentic from people. And to me, like that's the most important, and that's what's great about YouTube to me. That's the way YouTube to me has changed media, is by making people more authentic. It's got to like the real reality TV as opposed to just, faked reality TV.
Yeah, and you can afford to let it breathe when you're not paying for every single second that you're on the air.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I mean, you can also cut that later in the edit. But I just mean like the way to get genuine stuff from people is to let it breathe.
So in the life cycle of a YouTuber, for example, you and I talked about this, Derek. People start off, they start doing their thing because they're interested in it, and then they see some success. And then Matt and I had a debate earlier today about the term you used, anchoring. Mm. You say, oh, well, I'm getting a certain number of views every time, or I get a certain reaction out of people. And then when that doesn't happen anymore and you start to go over the top of the curve and you start to come down, I think there's some weird changes that happen in your brain. And
Can I just ask real quick while you hold that thought?
Yeah.
Hold that question. So by anchoring in your last video, the flip chart video, you talked about anchoring. Were you talking about the mental anchoring of a YouTuber where you're like, hey, I get, like, let's use my channel, for example, 14 views per video. But then if my next video gets only 9, I'm like, Mom, could you hit refresh 5 more times, please? But are you talking about that, like having an expectation of a certain baseline of results?
Definitely talking about expectations. Because I remember how excited I was in the early days to get 100 views or 1,000 views, or the first time I got 14,000 or 60,000, you know? Now 60,000 would be a horrible disappointment. You know, it's like I have clear expectations. I have a sense of like, you know, I think the subscriber number really did that to me. There was a time when views and subscribers tracked pretty closely. And then there was a time, I don't know, 2012, 2013, when it really started to diverge. And it just drove me crazy psychologically of like, oh, I see this big subscriber number, but a tiny view number. What's happening? It's almost as though all those people who said they like me don't like me anymore, which is worse than them not liking me in the first place. You know, like that I think is a real psychological phenomenon, and I think it's affected a ton of YouTubers.
Derek, it's like when, like if, for example, you were somebody who worked at a church for a really long time, and then people came to that church, and they're like, this is great. You don't think about all the people who are still there saying, this is great, thanks for being so nice to my family and providing us with good content every week. You think about those couple of people who are like, this is not great. I don't like your face or your words or how you are. And we're going to go to this other church or no church. That's what sticks with you. And so, yeah, okay.
I would like to hear your answer to this, Derek. I found in my heart that I'm never satisfied with the number of whatevers that's happening in my life. I always want more. And the way I would describe this is this unfillable hole of selfish ambition in my heart, which is that's pretty dense, right?
That's a lot of words.
That is heavy. It is heavy.
Yeah, it is. So what
Sounds like the Svalbard video, if I'm to be totally honest.
the Svalbard video in Norway where Derek went to the seed vault?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. So my question is, you have clearly adapted and you've changed your packaging. And I truly believe you're about to take off in a big way. And I would like you to remember the small people. Please remember us.
It's funny that you mentioned that because you're a pretty big one.
It's about to happen, Derek. Whether you like it or not, you're about to take off. It's just the way it is, man.
Well, it'll be interesting to see. But like, I don't, you know, it's funny. I feel like partly I've achieved a lot of things in life that were big goals for me. Like I have a house, I have kids, I have a wonderful wife. It's something that I don't necessarily want to show off, but it's like, these are dreams I had even just 3 or 4 years ago. These were, you know, seemingly unattainable dreams. And now I have those. And although I still feel what you talk about as like this unfillable hole of selfish ambition, I feel it less. Like I feel like some other things are maybe more important to me. And that some, you know, we talk about doing videos that are kind of for us or, you know, they're passion projects. And like, we're not doing this for growth. We're not doing this, you know, to blow up, but we're doing this because it's like deep in our core and we want to express something and we want to share something. We want to teach people about something they've never thought of before. And I feel more freedom, more latitude maybe to do that now than I would have felt, you know, 3-4 years ago when I felt like, you know, I just wanted to kind of be an adult, you know? And now I feel like I've made that leap. I feel very much like an adult these days. And I feel like, yeah, I've got a lot of the things that I always wanted.
Can I just say on a personal note, watching you transform into a father and a family man has been one of the joys of my life. Like seriously, no, it's been a big deal. Like a long time. You know, you came out here whenever we did the Whirlpool video, the toilet swirl video. It was like
2015,
right?
Yeah.
That was my first awareness that Derek was a person.
Really?
Yeah.
The toilet swirl video.
Yeah.
That was
I
all
don't-
Derek, by the way. He
I don't-
let me participate. It was his idea.
Really?
Yeah.
It was brilliant.
You know
I
what?
sat there in my living room and said, "This is brilliant."
That was an idea like 3 years in the making, because we had talked, I think Destin and I, before we ever met, we had talked and said, let's do a collab. What collab should we do? And it was kind of obvious, staring us in the face, like, I'm in Australia, you're in Alabama, let's do this thing. I don't know if that was 2011, 2012, but that's sort of the genesis of the idea. And then I filmed mine at some point, and I had like left Australia by 2015, and Destin still hadn't filmed it. And I just called him up and I'm like, Destin, I'm coming to your house this week and we're just getting it done.
It happened
Yeah, that's a good way to get things done.
with me. Oh, you're sitting here in my house. That's what we're doing. We're gonna start this other YouTube channel, Derek, called History Nugget. And Matt got on a plane and came here, and like, we're gonna have the conversation.
I know how we'll get it started.
That's smart.
I'll come to your house
Yep.
and sit where you can't get away.
Yeah, real smart.
Yeah, but when you were here, I remember a lot about that visit, dude, because we had a lot of downtime together and we spent a lot of time, and you ate at our table with our family, and we just I think that's where it moved from like this person that I called one time, and then you quickly whipped out a I don't know if you remember this. The first anything we did together was for the helicopter series. You did a video. Do you
Sure,
remember?
gyroscopic precession, yeah.
Yeah, you made a video on gyroscopic perception,
Which has done
and,
really well for me.
yep.
And the only reason I did it was because you asked me to do it. So thank you.
It was really good. And so we were kind of acquaintances there, and then it moved from that to you came out, and I don't know, we interacted several times in Australia even, but like when you came out here and just hung out at the house and we spent time together, I think that's where it moved to friendship. And at that moment, I remember wanting all these certain things for you in your life, and seriously, it's been one of the joys of my life in the last several years, just watching Raquel come into your life and watching how everything's changed for you, and it's been awesome, dude.
Yeah.
So congratulations.
Thank you. I do feel like having kids changes your priorities, and it just changes so much about life. And I guess like the biggest thing that I didn't expect was how I would feel these echoes, like something cosmic and really meaningful about being in this interaction, a parent-child interaction that I experienced as a kid, and now I experience it as an adult. That's what I mean by like the echoes or the rhymes of like, it feels like I'm sort of lost at words for how to describe it, but it feels so meaningful and it feels so powerful to be able to experience the same situations, but now on the other side, and feel like so much more of like a rich connection to the whole of humanity and to my parents and to my kids and sort of to this whole chain of people that has come before, because this is how we have to get by. Even things I noticed, like when you start teaching your kid a word or something and you realize why the word is that way, for the first time, because you've always just assumed it was just a word, but like now the components of the word start to like glimmer before you as you're teaching it. And it's like, oh, I get it. I get it now. So that's been really, really exciting and wonderful for me.
Have you had a chance to talk with your parents about that? Like tell them the stuff that you learned from them and compare notes with them on this?
I haven't yet, but you're right. It's something that I should totally do. Yeah, I'd love to do that.
I talked with my dad about that one time, not too long after we had kids. And you said it more artfully than I said it then or could say it now, but I like that. It rhymed. I just recognized a few of these scenarios. Like, whoa, I do remember being on the other end of this. Mm-hmm. And I also recognize that pretty much everything I'm defaulting to right now is what you thought of, Dad. So I don't know if that was what Grandpa Max thought of before him. And wow, who knows the names of their great-grandparents? I actually have to think. That's embarrassing.
No, but I feel the same way. And also I think it gives you a new empathy, an empathy for what your parents went through. And you have this empathy for what your kids went through because you've been through that. And it's sort of this total experience of having to be in someone else's head or to try to experience the world through someone else's eyes, which maybe we're not forced to do as much when we're just looking out for ourselves, Yeah, it's totally transformed my life.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So we can totally let you go, man. We were just talking about how much we like that, or how much I have enjoyed watching you become, the dad and just everything that you've done. So I don't want to get in the way of that for sure. So
Yeah, and this might be weird because we don't know each other that well, but my wife helped put together ThinkerCon, and she's just an enormously smart, empathetic woman. Like, she's involved with what I do, so she looks at relationships, and she's made a couple of really nice remarks about you hauling kids around and all of that stuff. And like, I don't know, everything she said about everybody we interacted with was very kind and very positive. But as we kind of debriefed after the first or second day or whatever, I heard remarks about you. It's like, he just seems like a really nice, gentle dad who's really happy to be a dad. And I was like, yeah, that squares with what Destin said as well. So I don't know. I don't know you that well, but I know what it looks like when somebody is really happy to be in that role. And I'm happy that you're happy to be in that role.
Yeah.
And that you're doing it thoughtfully.
Well, thank
you. Your kids are lucky.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right, man. Well, we made it successfully weird. We will let you go. We do have a debate we need you to settle for us, though.
All right, let's do it.
Behind you on the desk, there is a thing, and
don't say what it is yet. We want to tell you our theories.
Don't say what it is. Okay, can you turn around and look behind you, Derek?
There's a lot of things. I've got a messy office.
Yeah, just point straight back there. It's a white thing. It's vertical. It's got a little red thing on the bottom of it.
Uh-huh.
Okay,
you guys have some guesses?
So my theory...
Yeah.
My guess was an elaborate vase with a little red thing on the bottom.
My thought was it is some type of device that you would use to steam a shirt to get wrinkles out or something like that, or maybe a dustbuster.
Destin, you're close.
You can't have two. Oh, stop. You can't have two guesses. Like, if I'm allowed to guess every item on the face of the earth, I'll win.
I'm gonna double down on the steaming thing.
So Destin is close. It is a steamer. It is a steamer.
Yes.
But it's here not for any shirts that I might steam. It's here because I used to have a backdrop up, and we would actually steam the backdrop to try to get it to, I would just use an iron for a shirt.
Technically sort of wrong. Right in the identification, wrong in the application, you get nothing.
So Derek... Oh, sorry.
No, I thought maybe you were like, you'd spotted it for the backdrop. You were like, oh yeah, steaming a backdrop. But you don't use a backdrop. You just use a wonderful room. And frankly, these days I try not to use a backdrop either.
You could put a flower in that. I mean,
but I like that.
You could get a flower in there.
You could get a flower.
I like your backdrop.
So everybody's right. Everybody's a winner.
Yeah, we just put this together for History Nugget. Yeah, so that's all history stuff that I've got. Like this right here. Oh, check this out. You're going to like this. I bought a high-speed film camera. Can you see that?
Yeah, that is awesome.
It's a film... I mean, I know you love cameras, so check this out.
Oh,
you see that?
That is cool. That is really cool.
I'm going to do that. That's going to happen. So, Derek, now I don't know how to close it. So we will let you go. Real quick, we just want to plug all of your things. So at Veritasium on Twitter.
Basically everywhere, yeah.
Yeah, and more importantly, you're making a huge shift to Patreon so that you can have a capacitor in that, that financial circuit that provides for the family. So what is it? Just patreon.com/Veritasium?
That's the one.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and the new video is the shade balls.
Yeah, well,
swimming in shade balls.
Can you swim in shade balls?
Which I gotta say,
I know we gotta go, but that was very disorienting.
We
all three did the thing where
we all did. We were
all three of us put up the finger of wait. Okay, I thought Derek
first. Go.
He gave us the finger first.
All I was gonna say was, so that video started out as like a bit of fun. It was like this, the reservoir video was blowing up, and I was like, oh, maybe I could swim in shade balls. But then once we actually got in, realized there was a ton of physics going on, and there was strange non-Newtonian effects, and the fact that one layer of shade balls cool, many layers much harder. So yeah. I would just say that for the piece. It sounds like a fun puff piece, but there actually was interesting physics in there and stupid experiments that I tried where I smashed my face. So,
it was good. I learned
something
things.
for everyone.
It counted. I feel educated.
Honest question: when are you getting rid of the balls? Because I have a no joke video that I'm working on that involves the crystal structures that you talked about. So, I took a fracture mechanics class last semester, and the contact energy. It's complicated, but long story short, the crystal structures that showed themselves in your pool are very important to why things break
and how hard things
the fact
are.
That you still have toughness,
right? But even you take steel, right, and you quench it, you get tiny little grains, and that makes it you're going to say tougher. I was going to say harder.
Yeah, well, hardness and toughness are different.
Right.
They're inversely related.
Oh my God.
I was hoping you guys would have a science fight.
No, long story short, I need to know when you get rid of the grain balls because, or no, they're not. I'm thinking already.
You're already calling them grain balls. You're like, yeah, they're no longer shade balls, man. Now they belong to me in my grain video.
I might need you to film some stuff for me. Is my point.
I would be totally happy to film some stuff for you. It would be cool to go back down to a monolayer because monolayer is obviously more interesting to look at and gives us better grain properties. The other thing would be to go to a monolayer and put the pool pump on and then see how the grains sort of adjust themselves and all that. So I started pulling them out today, but I'm not going to send them out for at least a couple weeks. But I do want to get them more off my pool because like dirt and leaves and stuff is getting trapped in there, and like spiders are making homes.
How much? Let me ask you this: would you be willing to sell a few thousand of those?
What I would do instead of selling them, because it looks like I might have to send all 9,600.
That's a good
Yes,
problem.
that is an excellent
Are you
problem.
kidding me?
That would be fun if I get there. I mean, right now we're at like 6,000 or something, but we may well get to 9,600.
What?
Yeah. It's
You're getting toward like red letter media territory there.
That has
man.
happened like today.
yeah, today it's gone from like 1,750 to over 6,000.
What? I'm going online right now to buy shade balls.
Dance, go dancing tonight. Wear the fancy suit on your date with Raquel tonight.
Yeah.
Like this is a celebrating.
Get the extra salsa on your Chipotle burrito.
6,748 as we speak.
Never mind then.
But-
that's awesome. You know what you're doing with your shade balls.
But I know people who you can get shade balls from. So give me a ring ding ding and I got a connection. I can hook you up.
That's awesome. I was going to say something else and I forgot what it was. It was about that video.
I remember what my thing was.
Go
that
for
I
it.
gave you guys the finger for.
Go.
So when you said that he was about to put out his shade balls video, I was sure you said shaved balls.
You know what? People have commented that.
It's an enormously disorienting thing, and I'm from the north and you're from the south, and it just didn't sound right to me. And rather than making an issue of it, I just kept listening and absorbed the social cues. And I was like, oh, it's like those balls from the last video. And I got it, but it gave me this traumatic flashback to 10th grade. We moved to this new school, right? And I did this thing where we would play home run derby out in the yard next to my church with my only friend, because I just had the one. And what we would do is we were working on getting better at throwing like breaking balls and stuff. And so I would take these tennis balls and my dad's razor, and I would just shave part of that tennis ball down, like literally shave balls. See?
Yeah, got it.
And then one end would be a little bit flat. And then if you really snap those fingers on it, you could get that to turn over and put a little nastier bite on that, and made it easier to win at home run derby, right? And simulate being better at throwing breaking stuff. So my mom, who's not super gifted at remembering things like this, or social things, sometimes she just forgets where she is. I am out front with all the students of my school afterwards. She's a teacher at this school. She's on the third level of the school, and I'm playing catch with my social studies teacher out there, and a whole bunch of people are gathered around, and I'm kind of a baseball guy, so this is sort of important to my identity. My mom opens the window of the school, and in front of, 100 of my peers, shouts out, "Be careful, Mark! He shaves his balls!" And then she makes this face like, "What have I done to my son?" But rather than saying something to correct it, she just retreats into the window, like Homer Simpson disappearing into the hedge, and just closes it. And I'm just left there to deal with that. I never recovered. I'm still not right.
No, that in cricket they will actually sand one side of the ball down. Brady taught me this so that they can actually make it move more.
That is not a thing.
I think,
How are they
they
cheating?
they
I think
shine
it's
it.
illegal. I mean, to use sandpaper is illegal. I mean, in baseball they use sandpaper sometimes, right, to scuff up one side of the ball.
Yeah, or a little an emery board,
Right, but that's illegal,
nail
right?
File,
Like, that's not allowed.
Micro. Oh yeah, you can't do that stuff.
And I mean, in cricket, also be illegal, but they can kind of shine it on their pants, which they do. You frequently watch them shining the ball on their pants, which looks a little awkward sometimes.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
I've got a video about
He
this.
shaves his balls.
I got a video about the
Really?
Magnus effect and throwing curveballs, and a particular position of a baseball where you can spin it and you can keep a smooth side at one position and you can get it to swing using that. And someone did it in a game and they caught it on camera and stuff. Anyway, I should send you the link to my video. It's not a great video. It's from years ago, but it's on this topic.
Next
that's
time
up my alley.
Next time you get back to Huntsville, man, we're going to go to a Rocket City Trash Pandas game. I'll take you to a baseball game.
Nice.
If you're interested.
Yeah, I'm totally down.
They're about to start. Thanks for being on with us, man. We know you're busy, and we greatly appreciate it. And congratulations on life and all the important things, and also the YouTube thing you
And
do.
killing it on videos. Just fantastic work, man.
No, thank you so much, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, it was fun, buddy.
Yeah.
We'll catch you soon.
Take it easy, buddy.
All right, bye.